Max and I just rolled into our local Shields here. We're gonna be setting up a new bow today. My new bow just came in the mail. It's the new RX5 from Hoyt, and I'm pumped because I haven't got a new bow in the last couple of years, for one, but two, the early reviews on this thing have been great from Hoyt shooters and non-Hoyt shooters alike. So I'm excited to get it set up and hopefully put a few arrows through it today. Those are my first couple shots with that bow, and man, it is dead in the hand. It's amazing. I was just telling Nick, who's helping me get set up, the difference even just going from the RX3, which was my previous bow, to this one. It just feels a lot different in a good way. It's a sweet shooting bow for sure. Hey guys, welcome to today's off-season show. We're talking about the RX5 today. I just got my new bow in, and I'm going to talk about how I have it set up, the accessories I have on it, and how I like to get tuned up. You know, we get a lot of questions about our individual bow setups, so we're going to run through that today. You know, in today's world where all these manufacturers are making such high-end bows, and the technology is truly amazing, I love seeing the innovation, and Hoyt didn't fail to do that on this bow. You know, there's a few different things I really like, but starting with the stabilizer. So they completely changed the location. Normally you're used to the stabilizer coming out right here from the riser. They lowered it and moved it further forward, which lowered the center of gravity. And the first thing I noticed pulling out of the box was just that. The weight and the balance felt awesome, just straight out of the box. And that's because they include this with the bow, this little shortstop 2 1/4 stabilizer comes on the bow. So that's pretty cool they include that. And again, I love the innovation, just something small, but now you don't have to have a long stabilizer. Now it's a lot shorter, a lot more compact. Everything just fits right into place and it feels really good in your hand. Secondly, Hoyt came out with a brand new cam system. These are the HBX cams, very smooth to draw back. One cam for all of the different draw lengths, just switching out of module. They also have a little easy adjustment for let off, going between 80% and 85%. One of the first things I did, I changed it from 85 to 80, and I personally like more tension when I'm at full draw. I don't want too much let off because I just feel like there's a lot more room for error back there if you're not pulling through, if you don't have that tension. That's personal preference. You know, some guys like having that extra 85% let off where you can hold it longer and not get tired as easy, but for me, I like having the tension all the way through the draw. So that was one thing I changed right away, but it's so simple to change with that one little bolt. I'll talk more about how I have this bow set up and the accessories I have on it, but overall just a really sweet shooting bow, very smooth in the draw cycle like I mentioned, and the bigger thing to me is very dead in your hands after the shot. You know, there's just nothing, and probably more so than any other bow I've ever picked up. It's very, very dead in your hand, and I really like that in a bow. So this thing's been a lot of fun to shoot so far. As far as my particular setup, I'm a 28.5-inch draw, and I'm pulling back 65 pounds. I went ahead and got the 55 to 65 pound version, and for me, 65 has always been enough. I'm not one of those guys that thinks I need to pull 70, 75 pounds to be effective in the whitetail woods, or even on big game out west. 65 has always been a really comfortable draw for me, even when it's really cold and you're layered up. 65 has kind of been my sweet spot, so that's what I have this bow set up to as well. One of the first things I did when the bow came in was I put on a new set of strings, the Platinum series from ABB. And to be honest, before I started shooting, I've been shooting these for a few years now, but before I started shooting these, I used to just think bowstrings were bowstrings, but I've been so impressed with these. Very reliable, very little peep twist. They've just been really, really good to shoot. And I just went with kind of a natural color here. The nice thing about those is custom. You can pick whatever string colors you want. I'm not a real colorful guy, so I just kind of went with a natural color, but really big fan of these ABB strings. And I should note as well, I ordered these basically when the day the bow came in, and less than 4 days later I had them at my house. So in today's world where it seems like everything's backed up production wise, ABB has very short lead times. If you're in the market for new strings, definitely check those out. One other really cool innovative feature that Hoyt came out with on this bow is the ability to mount a sight directly to the front of the riser rather than the side with a Picatinny rail. Unfortunately, the sight that I wanted to use didn't come in that configuration, but they at least have one I know of, and I think other companies are also coming out with sights to work with that mount. So whenever that happens, I could definitely see myself switching to that. Then you have less weight to try to counterbalance. So mounting directly to the front of the riser is a really cool feature. But in regards to the sight that I wanted, like I mentioned, this is the Fuse flywheel slider. It's the 3-pin version, and this is my second year shooting it, and I'll tell you why I like it and decided to go with it again this year. I've never been into shooting the single pin sliders. I want less to worry about rather than more when it comes to adjusting. I really like the 3-pin where you can have your 20, 30, 40 set. You don't ever have to worry about moving your sight until you get past that distance. So when I was out elk hunting last September, I had that ability to dial it to 50, 60, 70 yards if I needed to, or on the range, it's nice to be able to dial it to what you want. But from a whitetail standpoint and bucks running around during the rut and not having to worry about adjusting distances, you know you have those 3 pins set, ready to go. You don't ever have to slide your sight if you don't have to. You don't have to adjust it. But it's nice having kind of the best of both worlds. So that's why I'm a big fan of this. Has the micro adjust, just been a really good sight the last couple of years. Along the same lines of having the ability to front mount that sight, the Ultra Rest Integrate MX, which is the rest I'm shooting on this, actually mounts via dovetail mount directly to the riser rather than on the side too. So keeping everything in line, having, like I said, less weight to try to counterbalance side to side is really cool feature and new on these new bows from Hoyt. I like these drop away rests. I like that this one is all aluminum instead of the forks and the frame being plastic like a lot of them have in the past. This one's all aluminum, just going to be more durable. I really like that it has the micro adjust. A lot of times when you're trying to find that center shot and get everything right, all it is micro adjust, but it can be really hard if you don't have that feature. If you're just using the Allen wrench and trying to just nudge it side to side, it's really easy to move it too much. So having the little micro adjust clicking makes that process a lot more simple. As for my Peep Sight, nothing too special here. This is a Raptor Peep from Hamsky Archery, and aluminum housing. 3/16 is the size that I shoot. It does have a couple string angle slots so you can match your string angle, which is kind of nice. But like I said, this is one that I've been using for a few years. I just keep taking it off my previous bows and throwing it on my new one just because it's worked well. I do wish I could go a little bit smaller than a 3/16. 3/16 is usually that middle size, and I like having it as tight to the ring on my sight as possible, and I'm looking through it. However, in the whitetail woods, we face a lot of low light situations, and if you go down on that Peep Sight size, it's going to let less light in. So I go with the trade-off and get that middle size just for more light gathering ability. So I talked about this little short stabilizer that Hoyt includes with the bow, and it feels really good with that. The only thing I might play with whenever it comes in is Hoyt made a little short sidebar to go on this to counterbalance any weight you have on this side of the bow. The only thing I have right now, like I mentioned, is that sight. I don't typically shoot with my quiver on, so I don't have to worry about that. But it's always kind of fun to play around with different options and different stabilizers to see really what fits you. It does come down to personal preference and how you shoot, but that's the only other thing I might add to this once it comes in. As for my arrow, I've been shooting the same one for a long time now, and this is the Easton Axis 340 spine. It's a small diameter 5mm, and it's one of those things, if it's not broke, don't fix it for me. I've just had such good luck with this, and even though it seems like there's a big movement to shoot the heavier arrows, or at least the higher FOC, more weight up front, I still shoot 100 grain head, no extra weight, and just these small diameter carbon arrows. So To each their own on that. It seems like there's a lot of opinions across the arrow industry. It's more about finding what works for you. Of course, everything can be situational. You know, what if you find yourself here, you're gonna want this setup. That's true, but you know, most of the time I try to keep myself out of those what if situations and just worry about what's gonna happen 99% of the time. And 99% of the time, this setup has worked to perfection. Even when I'm shooting through a shoulder with a fixed blade broadhead, like I did this year a couple times, including on the Big Ten. It's been intentional, and it's been because I'm very confident in my setup in that situation. So that's kind of how I have my arrow set up, and have had it for a long time because I've had no issues. On the back end, I really like shooting lighted nocks. However, I've yet to find one that I like, or one that I can rely on. I feel like that's one area that the industry as a whole is behind on. It doesn't seem like anyone makes a really good lighted nock. If anyone has suggestions, I'm open to it. I try new ones all the time, multiple times a year, and I've had issues with pretty much every single one I've ever tried. But with that being said, I really do like lighted nocks just for the better visibility as to where your shot hit. That piece of information is invaluable in my opinion when it comes to things like tracking decisions, how soon you take up the trail, etc. So I do like lighted nocks. I've yet to find a really good one though. And one more thing before I start shooting, I'm still using the Keaton Release from Spot Hog. Always been a big fan of this release ever since I first started shooting it. It's starting to show some good signs of wear now after a few years, but still works great. Biggest thing about this release that I like is it's kind of a combination between like a T-handle back tension release and then your regular wrist strap release. You kind of get the best of both worlds by being able to pull back with more than just your wrist. You can use your hands as well, which you can pull more weight back, you can hold it longer, etc. So this has been a very good release, and I'll continue to shoot this one. So when I'm setting up a new bow, there's a few things I like to do. First of all, I like using my local shield store. They have a really good archery department. Guys are knowledgeable in there, and going in there provides me a good starting point. I actually used to do all this on my own when I had access to the equipment with the level, bow press, all that. Back when I was actually working in the arrow industry, I love doing that. It's a lot of fun, and I'd recommend to anyone that hasn't done it to try it if you can get your hands on the equipment. It provides you a good understanding and helps out, especially when you experience some frustrating times as far as bow not shooting right, arrows not flying right. Having that background info can make that less frustrating. But now without access to the equipment, it's really convenient to go with shields. It's always good catching up with those guys. And again, that's just a starting point. So get everything tied in, a D-loop, Peep Sight, get the accessories put on, get center shot started, do a paper tune. That gets me pretty close. Following that, I always like to double check that center shot. Make sure as I work back to longer distances than what you are while you're paper tuning, that rest is still in the right spot and your arrows don't start to drift. And for that process, I like to do a walk back tune. And I'm going to go through the steps of how I do that today. And it's a really easy process. It takes 10 or 15 minutes once you get everything set up. For this, there's a few things you need. One, you need a target that has some pretty good height to it, because everything you're going to be doing during this process will be mostly vertical as far as where your arrows will land. And so the taller the target you have, the further you can work back, which gives you a more accurate check. So you can see I have two targets stacked on top of each other. And you'll want you can use painter's tape or a piece of string, something to create a vertical line. And it's very important that that line is level. And when I say level, I don't mean perpendicular with the ground, because the ground may not be level wherever you're shooting. So you'll need to actually use a level to make sure, or hang it with a weight if you're using a rope or something, to make sure that line is perfectly level with gravity. Because if it's not, you're just going to be chasing your tail, and it's going to be a pretty frustrating process. Essentially what we're going to do, we're going to start out at a shorter distance. You can start 10 yards, 20 yards. I wouldn't go past 20 yards. I'll probably start at 10 yards just to make sure. I'm going to use my top pin, and I have an aiming point, a little orange circle at the top of that vertical line. And so I'm going to do this whole process. You're going to use the same pin even as you work out to 50 or 60 yards. And what you're checking basically is your arrows fall along that vertical line that you created. You want to make sure they don't start drifting off the further you get back, because if so, you need to adjust your rest left or right depending on where your arrows are hitting. All right, so I'm starting out at 10 yards, and again, I'm just using my top pin for this entire process. And right now, it doesn't necessarily matter a whole lot. If I hit up and down, I want to make sure left and right, my windage is dead on where I'm aiming at. So top pin, I'm going to aim at the orange dot that's at the top of the vertical line. Go make sure that's good. All right, so as you can see, we're good. We hit the dead center of this vertical strip. If you are left or right here, this is where you'd want to adjust your sight. You're adjusting your sight on this close distance. So adjust it to where you hit the middle, and then we'll start working back. We're good, so we're going to go back to 20. So now we're at 30 yards, and again, using the same pin. And as you work your way back, sometimes it's better to shoot a group of arrows to make sure there's going to be some human error involved, obviously, as you start getting back. But the main thing we're looking for is these arrows not getting too far away from that vertical line as you work out. You'll see a clear angled line if your rest is off center just a little bit. That one looked pretty good. We're gonna shoot one more just to make sure. So we're pretty good right there, just a little bit on the right side, but pretty dang close to that vertical line. We'll just see if it continues to go out as we're good, or if we can stay on that vertical line the whole way. Alright, so we're going to move back to 50 now. Those two arrows are good. At 40, they're off a little bit up and down. It's with the sun shining at me as I'm shooting, I can't really see the orange dot at the top, so I'm floating a little bit there. But again, that up and down doesn't really matter for this process. It's more the left or right, making sure that you can continue to fall on that vertical line. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with this. That was at 50, and obviously this one drifted a little bit to the right. I'll probably shoot a little bit more to confirm, but I'm not seeing what you would typically see if your rest is off center. So usually you'd have it hitting where you need to up here, and it'd slowly drift further away as you got back. So 20, 30, 40, 50, however far you went back, or like this. If it's pretty close to the line, just bouncing back and forth a little bit, it's more likely to be human error. But you're just making sure you don't have this angled line that gets further away the further out you shoot. So if you do see this where your arrows drift further away from this vertical line as you go out, you need to adjust your rest. And as far as which direction, if you're missing over here to the right, you're going to move your rest back to the left to bring your arrow back to center. Same thing on this side. You move your rest back to the right to move back to center. If you think about it, you think of an arrow sitting on the rest. If you're missing to the right, you need to move the whole thing back to the left. So it's opposite of what you do when you're sighting in and moving your sight. A lot of times you're chasing that arrow and moving your sight the direction you miss. With your rest, it's the opposite. So just think about bringing your arrow back to center if you are seeing that where it's drifting apart. You know, tuning is one of those things where everyone has their preference, and a lot of people are pretty opinionated on which one's the best. For me, it's about doing something. You can do bare shaft tuning, you can do the walk back. There's another variation of this called French tuning, where essentially you're just shooting the close shot and then the furthest shot. Same premise though as the walk back tuning. But I would recommend doing something just to double check that center shot. It really gets magnified at longer distances, or when you're trying to do things like broadhead tune, these little inconsistencies like that, making sure your rest is perfectly center shot, will make a huge difference when it comes to that stuff, and just your overall enjoyment of shooting and being very accurate. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that segment. Hopefully you took something away from it if you haven't experimented with walkback tuning before. And if you get a chance, I'd definitely recommend trying to find an RX5 to shoot. It's a really sweet shooting bow, and I'm excited to see what we can do with it this year.